It's ball talk. It's ball talk, baby. 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 Baby.
Hello and welcome to the Ball Talk podcast. It is currently 2:08 p.m. Wednesday, March 17th, Eastern Standard Time, all that. I'm your host, John Sock, and as always, I'm joined by my main man, Chaz Jurgens.
You know who it is.
Today, we're also blessed to have an opportunity to host the man behind the best highlight page on Instagram and the only man covering the G League, founder of G-LeagueTV, our good buddy, Jeff Kee. Jeff, how are you doing, my man?
I'm pretty good. Hey, thank you guys so much for having me. It's truly an honor.
Having you on is the honor, man.
Yeah.
And for everyone who doesn't know, G-LeagueTV is literally the only page on Instagram covering the G League. It is run by one man, and he is just amazing at his job. It's not even just good for people who want to watch highlights, which, by the way, it is amazing because the G League is just a highlight factory.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also putting on these players. He's selling every single post. Not only is he posting highlights, he's selling the players to NBA teams. You can go and look at any post, and he'll explain. He gives breakdowns. He does it's truly an art form. Jeff, what you're doing truly is an art form to me.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So let's start with quick. First, tell everyone how you got started with G League TV, what you were doing before,
Sure.
what you're doing now. Give everyone the Jeff Kee story.
Yeah, so I first started getting into the G League back when it was the D League around 2015 or so.
Mm-hmm.
And back in 2015, I cannot name one other of my friends or whoever that followed the G League. It was a really low publicized league, tons of talent nonetheless, but they didn't get too much exposure. And you never saw the games on TV at the time. The games were streamed on YouTube, and every once in a while there was one on NBA TV, but there was just not too much hype around the league at the time. And back then, and it was even worse before, the G League was considered one of these leagues where it was like really, where older players went to play their last years, and they were, if you're an older player, whether it was like a Nate Robinson or a Emeka before, they were kind of, people viewed him as washed up per se, and the younger guys, people viewed him as like, oh, they're just second tier type of talents. But, over the past 6 years, the league has really evolved where, these older guys that are playing in the G League, they're not viewed as necessarily washed up anymore. They're viewed as guys that can still contribute on NBA teams.
Mm-hmm.
And then the younger guys, a lot of them are viewed in a more positive light now, where they're not seen as B tier or C tier. They're kind of seen as on the cusp of making the NBA. Whether it's a 2-way deal, whether it's a 10-day, they're just right on the border of taking that next step. But yeah, I started getting into it around then. And I live about an hour away from Delaware. And so I used to go to Delaware 87ers games all the time. I'm actually rocking a Delaware 87ers jersey right now for my man Stead Lemon. So shout out to Stead. But, and so I really fell in love with it then. Of course, I watched the NBA a ton. I followed the NBA religiously, but something about the smaller league that wasn't getting much publicity, I don't know, I just kind of fell in love with the fact that, especially back then, it was unique to be a G League fan, whereas everyone was kind of just an NBA or college basketball fan. It was kind of just something to separate myself, following the G League. But I started the page last April, so it's been about 11 months. And I started it, probably within a couple weeks of quarantine happening. My whole goal was just to gain a couple thousand followers and, maybe make some highlight tapes for these players. It wasn't really, I didn't really think of it as something that was going to take off or really gain thousands of followers. I was like, if I can get a couple thousand, because I had run other basketball pages before, and it had probably maxed out at like, one was a UMBC because I work for the UMBC team. One was like a UMBC archive highlight page, and it's a small niche community, so it got a couple hundred followers and stuff like that. And so I was, if I got a couple thousand on this page, I would have been happy. But I've, for the last 11 months or so, I've tried to use it as a platform to get these players exposure, because there is a ton of talent in the G League that kind of, even still to this day, even though the G League has done a good job of publicizing these guys, they still don't get that much recognition. You know, most fans are really just paid attention to the stars in the NBA. So, you know, it's been a really good 11 months. I've been able to grow it to around like 32,000 followers or so. And my whole, you know, goal and objective is to really just put these guys out there and help them get maybe another contract, whether it's in the NBA, hopefully, or overseas. And then to expose the fan, the average fan, to these guys, and just to get them to know how much talent there is just kind of hiding in the G League at this time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about Chaz. I know I'm a massive fan of the G League TV. I actually would, for a little while, I didn't follow the page because I loved that it would show up all in my Explore page, and I'd get like 3 random highlights a day. I loved it so much. It was awesome. Like in a way, you kind of played the Explore algorithm so well. Like, I mean, I like everything. I post like everything you post. I'm a huge fan of the G League TV thing. But you're also the only one promoting it. You're the only one promoting it. And so I'm wondering, do you have a tie to the NBA? Has the NBA reached out to you? Have you reached out to the NBA? Is there any communication on that front?
You know, not so much from their end, but a little bit from my end, because I am trying to just promote the page and promote myself as much as possible, you know? And so my whole thing is the G League account doesn't follow my page, right? And so
there's a G League account that isn't your page.
Say it again.
There's a G League account that isn't your page.
Right. The main account, they don't follow my page, and they've never liked a post or commented or anything, right? So my whole goal is like, I'm just waiting for the day where they just show some type of love, or that they've noticed the account, you know? And so from their end, I haven't gotten much. I mean, the good thing about the page is that I do talk to a lot of people within the G League, and a lot of, whether they're, you know, of course the players, but coaches, executives, people, you know, whether they're in their marketing or sales or, you know, whoever, a lot of them follow the account. So I do have really consistent contact with these people. But there hasn't been too much discussion on either end, or any discussion on either end, about maybe like working together. I would love to be like the official highlight page of the G League, you know, where, you know, it's G League affiliated, and I can just produce as much content, you know, as possible, because I think the whole goal with the page is to put out and expose the players that are averaging, like, you know, even 15 points a game. Unfortunately, whether it's the NBA or the G League, those guys who average 15 are still really good players, but they don't get much exposure. You know, it's always the guys who are averaging 25 plus, which is totally understandable. And then there's the superstars that everyone cares about. Like, you know, for example, everyone loves to see the Kevin Porter Jr. highlights, right? Everyone loves to see the Jamie Lin highlights. So by default, you know, I have to post those. But, you know, I would love to work with the G League on getting those guys exposure too, but helping get, you know, the guy that's averaging 12 and 10, you know, that doesn't really get much love, or the guy who's averaging maybe, you know, there's a couple guys in the league that average, you know, 8 points, 8 assists, right? But you don't really see them on any highlight page, just the way that you wouldn't see, like,
assists, like,
right,
sleeps on these assists. But.
Exactly. You know, like Andre, I was thinking about the other day, like Andre Miller was a guy that in his NBA career probably had, you know, 15,000 points and like 8,000 assists, right? But he was a guy that we just never talk about because he was never flashy and was never like a big name per se, you know? So the whole, you know, objective is to get those guys in the G League the exposure, and then hopefully in the future I'll be able to work with the G League on doing stuff like that.
So is the end goal to become affiliated with the G League? Do you want to move into the NBA too? What would be the end goal for you from this G League TV project?
You know, I would love to work for the G League in like any capacity, tell you the truth. You know, I always say, even when I first started following them in 2015, like, if they needed a guy that would fill Gatorade bottles, I would do it. You know, I just love the G League so much, and I love being around it. And it's such a part of like my life now, you know, and has been over the past few years, that I would just be honored to do anything within the G League. But as far as the page goes, you know, if they ever needed help doing like social media stuff or marketing stuff, because there's other ideas that I have, you know, for the page and also for exposing the league, that I would love to communicate with people within the league itself. And so hopefully that, you know, takes off in the future. But, you know, my main goal right now is just to build the page as much as possible, you know, and I have around 32,000 right now. So my next goal is just to get like 40,000, you know, and then after 40,000 is 50,000. But the good thing is that it's only been 11 months, you know, so I'm pretty optimistic that in a few years it'll continue to grow, and then hopefully I'll have something there. And if I ever get an interview in the G League or whatever, I'll have a good selling point for myself as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It'll definitely be a lot easier for you once there's a real G League season and not just like a 3-week
Yes,
bubble.
right. That was the thing for me too, is like the season was just so short.
Mhm.
15 games, I couldn't really work with that much. And it was, I understand it costs a lot of money for these teams to have their G League teams in the bubble
Mhm.
and to feed them and to, house them in these really nice Disney hotels and stuff like that. But 15 games is hard to work with because, usually for a regular player, the G League has so much turnaround where it's like a player's here and then they're doing really well and then they get called up, or a player's doing really well and sometimes they'll go overseas, for some quick, easy money. But this year there wasn't too much of that. It's like a lot of the players who were glued on the bench never got an opportunity to shine. And then and so, from a player's perspective, I would love to have seen, they probably would have appreciated 25 games, and then on my end, I would need, I would appreciate as much content as possible, so 25 games would have been, 10 more games added on to the 15 game schedule would have been great for me in terms of like just putting out more game content.
No, and it's surprising that no one, even like Bleacher Report or any of these other apps that share highlights or work with NBA or other sports divisions, have contacted you, just because when you have it seems like a monopoly on G League content at this point, you seem to be the guy to go to for anything, anytime G League. Is there any other pages that have reached out to you where you could get to before the NBA, like as a stepping stone to try to get your name out there a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been thinking about it over the last couple weeks or so, especially as since the season ended. And I was thinking, Slam is a magazine that I think has gotten on board with things before they've gotten hot. Like, so it started like Slam High School Hoops and years ago, and then they had W Slam, which is on the women's side. They started League Fits, which is, before anybody cared about what players were wearing, they were, they had their Instagram page, and it's been huge. I was wondering, I wanted to reach out to them, and I will reach out to them about partnering somehow. And, this is the new wave of basketball where, it might not be huge now, but give it a couple years and, more players of high status continue to join the league. And so, yeah, in terms of like, whether it's Slam, Bleach Report, what are some other ones? House of Highlights, I would love to partner and work with any of them, just depending on the situation and, how we can both benefit kind of thing. But, I don't want to rush it too much because it has been only 11 months, And so, I'm totally fine doing it on my own, and I like doing it on my own. I'd like having like the creative control over all the content, but I'd be open to pretty much anything regarding that.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've noticed, but you've gotten a lot of love from, especially former G League guys, but also former league guys. A personal friend and mentor of mine, Rashad Phillips, was actually the one who put me on. You posted a mixtape of Rashad Phillips, I want to say a couple months ago, and he posted it. He was so happy with it. He's like, everyone needs to follow this page, and I was like, well, I can't not follow this page now. Like, this is. And like, I mean, I take Rashad's word as my Bible. Like,
right. Yeah, Rashad's a great guy. He and I have talked a bunch through Instagram DM and stuff like that. And actually, I most recently reached out to Rashad maybe a couple weeks ago because I found an old picture of Roy Jones Jr. And I was just on Getty Images. And on Getty Image, you can filter the pictures depending on like, the newest or the oldest. So I just typed in NBDL, which was before the D League, it was the NBDL, and typed in NBDL on Getty Images, selected oldest images, and was just going through all these pictures from 2001, 2002. And, me being kind of a history buff of basketball, whether it's the NBA or college basketball or, now the G League, it was just really cool seeing all these guys that were NBA stars in some sense that played in the G League, like Josh Howard played for the Austin back when they were the Austin Toros. He played with them back in like 2012. You guys remember Ricky Davis? He played for the Celtics, played for the Cavs. He played for the Bayhawks back in 2013.
Mm.
And so Jamal Tinsley, he was a really good point guard for the Pacers. He played for the LA Defenders. So I was seeing all these pictures and headshots, and I was like, oh my God, seeing some of the stuff was so cool. But I did see one that really stuck out, and that was it was Roy Jones Jr. in a D-League uniform from 2001. And I looked it up on Google because I'd never known about that. And I looked up on Google, and there was no information about it. There was no articles, whatever. But Rashad Phillips was also on that team in 2001. It was mobile. He was on that team in 2001. And I just messaged him. I was like, was Roy Jones Jr. your teammate? And then he goes, sort of. He was there for the training camp, but he didn't make the actual roster, whatever. And I was like, that's still so cool. And there was pictures of him in the G League jerseys, in the NBDL jerseys. And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. But yeah, Rashad was actually the first point guard ever drafted in the D League, and he was in the same 2001 draft as Birdman Anderson. And so if you look at some of those pictures from the draft, Rashad's there, and he's holding up his he got drafted, and they had him holding up a shooting shirt, his like draft day shooting shirt. And then he's in that picture with Birdman Anderson. It was so funny because back in 2001, the D League had no credibility, right? And so Birdman came into, he was the number one pick in the draft. He came into the draft wearing a Hawaiian shirt and jeans. Like, who comes to the draft wearing a Hawaiian shirt and jeans? But yeah, he's been really good. But like you were saying before, it's been really cool for me to see the players share, because that's what means the most, is like that the players appreciate it, whether it's the players themselves that the video is actually about, or their teammates or whatever. And I don't really follow that many NBA players through the page. I do on my personal account, but not through the page. And so I miss a lot of people's stories and posts and stuff like that. But the good thing is I have a lot of the followers will send me stuff as the players post it. So Bradley Beal has posted 2 times. Or posted on a story a couple of times. LaMelo Ball has posted on a story 3 times. He's reposted the videos. Jason Tatum, some really like interesting NBA players follow, like Kendrick Perkins randomly followed the account.
Yeah, no, Kendrick Perkins loves that stuff.
Yeah. And then Perk also played in the G League too. Back for the Canton Charge back in like 2018, and then he got called up by the Cavs and was on their NBA Finals roster towards the end of the season.
I forgot about that. I forgot about his brief stint in the G League back then.
So Perk follows. Baron Davis follows. Duncan Robinson. I mean, the Baron Davis played in the G League too. He played for the Delaware 87ers. And Duncan, he was a star a couple years ago for the Skyforce. And so, but yeah, it's been pretty cool. Tyler Hero shared a few times. So seeing the megastars, share it is always really cool, because I always figure they're like, they're always sent a million posts, and they're tagged in a million things. So if they see it, it's an honor that they'd share. They think it's cool enough to share in their story.
That's No,
that's
so
amazing.
cool. I don't really have a word. I just like, wow.
And the coolest thing for me is that a couple months ago, and I wore it for a podcast I was on a couple days ago, so I actually switched jerseys. I'm wearing my man Stead Lemon's jersey right now. But Raphael Putney, who played for the Iowa Wolves this year, and he's the all-time leading shot blocker in G League history, he actually sent me his Bayhawks jersey. And he mailed it to me. So yeah, and so it was like really cool to get. He's the all-time leader in blocks in G League history. So it was really cool that he signed the jersey and then sent it to me. And he offered it. It was something that it wasn't. I didn't DM him asking for the jersey. It was kind of, he was like, as a gesture, as a thank you. So he and I have become really cool. So yeah, the relationships I have with the players now is pretty awesome.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And I mean, I've seen your Instagram. You're tight with all the players. You did TBT, and you were taking pictures with everybody.
Yeah.
Like
right.
You've kind of built yourself into this whole basketball, like into the culture. Like I don't gonna say it again. NBA, just hire this man. Come on.
That is the dream. That is, but through TBT, I've actually been able to meet a lot of cool players. Like I met Joe Johnson, and this past summer we were in the TBT bubble for 5 weeks. And Joe just couldn't have been the nicest guy. He was just fantastic to work with, and a really humble dude. And this is a guy who made 7 All-Star games, made $100+ million in his career, has 20,000 points, and he just was like a regular guy. Acts like a regular guy. It was super nice and respectful. You know, it was great seeing Joe Johnson. But yeah, I've been able to meet quite a few players, but it's kind of weird that I value meeting the G League players over the NBA players. You know, like if someone was like, I can meet Trae Young, or I can meet like who's a really cool G League player, like Kevin Porter. I don't know. I might just meet Kevin Porter. You know, like something about him having the G League experience would mean more to me. You know, meeting him.
Also, I just gotta say, just because you mentioned him, Kevin Porter, I would directly give you credit for putting him on. Like directly, if people were like, "Why is Kevin Porter now so big on the directly?" It would be because you posted every time he had a good game, and now you're posting when he has good games in the NBA. Like directly, I think there's a correlation between your posts about him and the outlook on him. I just want to say, I want to say that because that's been on my head for a long time. I'm like looking at these. I'm like, this would be nothing. It would be he would really not have this nice perception about him if it wasn't for G League TV.
Yeah, you know, it's with Kevin, it was almost like a given that I had to post every time he had a good game. You know, because there were even a couple games where he didn't really play all that well. He might have had 15 points. So, you know, if he has 15, for a guy that's probably expected to score 25, I wouldn't post the 15 points per game. The 15-point games. But even when he had a bad game, people would always comment like, "Post Kevin Porter, Kevin Porter, Kevin Porter." So over time, I was like, I guess they just love Kevin Porter, you know, and they want to, even if he didn't play all that well, you know. And I would say this: he's probably going to be the MVP this year. I think there's no doubt about it. And he just sometimes made it look so easy. You know, there was no doubt in my mind that he was going to be a really good NBA player. I mean, he played really well in the Cavs last year to begin with. He averaged double figures with the Cavs, but there was no doubt in anyone's mind that this guy wasn't, you know, if he can get all the off-court things situated, that he wasn't going to be a really, really good player, you know. But yeah, the fans really loved him. Same with Jeremy Lin. They loved Jeremy Lin. And the cool thing that I always thought about Kevin Porter was that whenever I would post a video about him, he would never share the video about him. But as soon as I posted a video about his teammates, he would always share the video about his teammates, right? So, like, if he had a point,
Hold up,
triple-double,
I think we just lost you for a second.
I was about it. He'd share that. But if, let's say, Arnie Brooks had 7-3, oh, you see me?
Yeah, you're back. You're back. Sorry, I think we lost you for a second.
Okay. Can you cut that part out?
Yeah, of course. Don't worry. I got the editing chops. I've been practicing.
Oh, gotcha. What part did I cut out on?
So we were talking about Kevin Porter Jr. He shares all of his teammates' posts, but not his own.
Right. Yeah. So Kevin, he really cool thing about him is that he shares every post about him. He won't share, but any post about his teammates, he'll share and he'll comment. Right. And so I always thought that was really cool because, you know, there was all these misconceptions maybe about Kevin, who he is as a person, and, you know, if he has discipline issues or whatever. But everything that I heard about Kevin was that he was a great teammate in the bubble. And with him sharing his teammates' videos, and, you know, because he has a big platform himself, he probably has a couple 100,000 followers. Him resharing these videos about his teammates gets them a ton of exposure too, you know. And so I always thought that was really cool and a pretty noble thing of him to do.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be the first ones to say that we were all about Kevin Porter getting to a new spot and proving how good he is as an NBA player. So to get that time in the G League, both me and John were saying we're super excited for him. We know he's going to do great, and it's just to get that fresh start and be able to go show his skills and be that guy for a little bit. It shows how great he is, and that you were able to put him on and show how great he has been and made his teammates better. It's incredible to watch that, the rise of the Houston Rockets G League team while their NBA team can't win a single game.
Absolutely. And, you know, Kevin Porter, he was great. Him being in the G League was great on everybody's end. It was great for the G League because, you know, rarely do they have a high-profile player like that. I know Lin also played this year. But Kevin Porter, where he's a budding superstar, you know, and everybody views him in that light. Like, you know, he had discipline issues in high school, you know, in college as well, and that's why he slipped in the draft. But, you know, there were a lot of people that were like, this guy's a top 10 pick or in a top 5 talent, you know, if he can get all the disciplinary issues sorted. And so, you know, it's really kind of a consensus view that yeah, this guy has a chance of being a 20 points per game plus player in the NBA. But it was great for the G League because they had him and he, they were able to feed off of the publicity that he gave them. But it was also good for Kevin. Maybe it was a bit of a humbling experience for him to have to go down to the G League. I know Kevin doesn't view himself in that light. He thinks of himself probably in the highest light that he can go in the NBA on any given night and score 20,
And I mean,
And
it
so
kind of has been.
yeah. And so it's been a great thing on his end because, you go to the G League, hey, you're playing with 14 other guys who are dying to be in the same spot that you're in. 14 other guys who would love to be Kevin Porter on the Rockets, Kevin Porter on the Cavs, right? And so he really was around guys who were not taking their place in professional basketball lightly. Like when I talk to G League guys, I mean, that's why the NBA guys and the G League guys, there was no chatter from the G League guys about, the bubble not feeding them well, or the rooms not being as nice or whatever, right? But we heard that a lot in the NBA. These G League guys are just here to ball, right? And, whether I'm sure, like I said before, they'd appreciate a longer season, more than 15 games. But trust me when I say that those guys were looking and being like, okay, it's 15 games for me to prove myself, right? And so Kevin Porter, for an entire season, for the most part, had to play with these dogs, right? He had to compete every night against guys who were just starving for an NBA opportunity, and so it probably put things in more perspective for him that, I'm in a great situation being on the Rockets. And then last year when he was on the Cavs, and I need to do maybe a little bit better job of maintaining my professionalism and then not taking my opportunity here for granted.
Yeah. I think this actually leads to a really good transition to the next thing I want to talk about, which is the G League Ignite guys.
Yeah.
And I just want to, I think that anytime we want to talk about G League Ignite, the first thing we need to say is the competition they face every night is at least 10 times better than anything in the NCAA. Almost every player that any of these G League Ignite guys have to guard on a given night would be the strongest, would be the hardest guy.
Absolutely.
That Cade Cunningham, Jalen Suggs, or Evan Mobley has to guard.
Right.
Every single night. These G League guys, none of them are taking it for granted. None of them are taking any moment on the court for granted. They don't care that you're some 19-year-old kid trying to guard them. They're like, all right, I've got the child on me. I'm going to go get 30.
Yes,
I got Jalen Green guarding me. He has no shoulders. I'm going to go right through him. And, I mean, the G League guys still held their own, especially on the defensive end. Kuminga's defense really, really impressed me. But I think you have to point that out anytime you want to talk about the G League Ignite guys, just how much harder they went, and not only that the other G League players worked so hard, but that almost everyone that's actually playing in the G League was all conference, was all American, or all this, all that. All of them were these top college players now on a team against 4 guys that would be freshmen in college.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to talk about the main 4, their top 4 prospects: Jalen Green, Jonathan Kuminga, Daisha Nix, and Isaiah Todd. I'm going to throw it to you first. Would you rather start with Jalen Green, probably their best player, or Jonathan Kuminga, possibly their best prospect? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll start with Jalen just because there was so much hype around Jalen. And Jalen has, like, the cool factor, too.
Yeah.
Where
it's
one thing to be a baller, right? There's tons of ballers who just play and can score 20 points. But there's something about Jalen Green, first on the court. On the court, I mean, he's an athletic freak, right? But he's so supremely talented. And, I love Alize Johnson on the Raptors on a 5, but he had this insane crossover. He missed the shot. It's insane crossover on Alize Johnson. He threw down dunk after dunk this season, and I know those make the highlights for sure. But he is a really well-rounded player, and the thing is that he's 19 years old. That's the thing that's easy to forget is, like, he's a kid and he's playing against, and that goes with the rest of the Young Ignite players is that they're really kids and they're out here playing against grown men who are coming for their necks every game, I mean, if I was a veteran player, I would look at these Ignite guys and be like, look at these, like, young, like when the older guy, they always look at the younger guys as, like, these young punks or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, look at, like if you're working with an older guy, he probably views you as like, oh, look at that young kid, think he knows everything, thinks he's all hot, right? And I bet you that a lot of the veterans on these G League teams probably thought the same way, like, oh, he's this number 1 ranked player, this 5-star recruit, McDonald's All-American, whatever. But, this is my chance to shine, right? And, all the Ignite games for the most part were streamed on ESPN Plus because they wanted most people to see them. And a lot of them were on ESPN2 as well.
Yeah.
And so they were probably thinking the veterans were like, hey, this game is on national television. Like, if anything, it's my coming out party too. It's not, I don't care about Jalen Green. I don't care about Jonathan Kuminga, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but back to what I was saying before, Jalen Green just has the cool factor. Like, if you go on his Instagram, he's really into, like, all this really cool clothing and his style is up to date, and always wearing, like, rocking the cool colors and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when he's on the court, he just has, like, the supreme confidence at 19 years old to just go at people's neck. He was averaging, towards the end of the season, 20 plus on most nights, and really when the G League Ignite team, it's weird because when the G League Ignite team was doing well in the beginning, he hadn't really found his footing yet. And I think a lot of people were like, oh, he's really not all that good. In his first game against Santa Cruz Warriors, he wasn't really all that good. But towards the end of the season, when Kuminga went down and he was kind of as far as the younger guys go, he was like their main option. I mean, really saw him take more of a leadership role, at least on the court, and in situations demanding the ball, in situations taking shots in the final minutes when the game is close, and you just don't see it. You just don't really see it among young players like that. Granted, too, there are veterans on the team, Like, I'm sure if Jalen Green wasn't comfortable taking the shot, he could have passed it to one of the vets on the team, whether it was like, an Amir Johnson or a Cody Demps or
Jared Jack, who was
Jared Jack, right?
He only played like Michael Jordan like 8 times.
yeah, and so it was really cool to me to see this young guy who's definitely going to be a stud in the NBA at 19 take on a leadership role in that sense, in the final minutes of games, despite having other veterans on the court who probably have taken those shots, a million times in their careers. Maybe not. You're right. Maybe not actually like Amir Johnson and Jared Jack taking those type of shots, but they're more comfortable taking those shots. They probably had like the Chris Pauls or the other stars they've played with on their NBA teams take those shots, but they've been in those situations before. And my favorite player, I like Kuminga a lot, and I love Jalen Green. My favorite player on that Ignite team, as far as the young guys, my favorite two were Isaiah Todd and Daishen Nix.
I loved them both. I'm with you.
Love them both, and both those guys flew under the radar a little bit because everything was about Kuminga and Green, which is totally understandable. But Daishen Nix is, he's huge for a point guard. He's like 6'5", 230. He's really like
a linebacker.
He's built like a linebacker, and I remember everyone was like, "This guy's a point guard. Like he has the body of a power forward."
Yeah.
But he is so poised, and again, 19 years old. 19 years old, and he's not the quickest, and I don't even know if he can dunk. He's not very athletic, but he just plays with so much confidence and so much confidence, poise, and he's like almost a veteran at 19 years old the way that he plays. And I know I mentioned Andre Miller before. A lot of people have compared him to Andre, in terms of like the lack of athleticism, the lack of speed, but just a strong understanding of the game and super crafty, But I love him, and I think that he's going to be, he's projected to go in the second round this year, and I think that's probably about accurate. But there's no doubt in my mind that in a couple years he can be a serviceable NBA player. And then Isaiah Todd was one of my favorites too because Isaiah, his offensive arsenal is just super crafty, and like he's not a guy that's gonna get much hype over guys like Kuminga and Green, but he would come in and score 10 points in 15 minutes off the bench. He's been compared to like Chris Bosh, even though I don't really necessarily see the Chris Bosh comparison as much. He's been a guy that you ask a lot of NBA scouts who's a player that the most resemble, they'd say Chris Bosh. But yeah, 6'10" and deep range, he could probably extend out to 25, 30 feet or so. And just a really, really crafty offensive arsenal, especially when he goes one-on-one, is able to back you down. He can hit like these one-legged fadeaways that kind of remind you of Dirk, and he's projected to also be in like the late first round, early second round type of thing. But there's no doubt in my mind that in a couple of years, he's also going to be a really good NBA player too.
Yeah, without a doubt, Isaiah Todd is probably the most polarizing player on that of their big four. I have seen him as an outside lottery pick on some drafts, and I've seen him like way out of the second round on others.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any more player that's been polarizing than Todd. But in the end of the day, what I always tell people is you look at the physical tools, and I mean, Chris Bosh is a ceiling,
Yeah.
but like, I can see the steps that it would take.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And I just wanted to bring up one point that it was just on my head. I have to, when you talk about the Ignite team, you talk about, of course, the young guys, right? And then there's the veterans. But Brian Shaw is their coach, and I actually think that he had the hardest job in the G League this year.
Oh yeah.
And the reason why is because you're trying to maintain so many egos and make so many people happy, With the Ignite team, you have all these young guys, and that's what the Ignite team was built for. It was built for these young guys, right? And it was built for them to have this platform to shine. And then you have the veterans, and don't get me wrong, the veterans are kind of a bunch of them are still at the tail end of their careers, whether it's Amir Johnson or Jared Jack, or like a Reggie Hearn or whatever. But there's a couple of them that were still really aching, in my opinion, to get to the NBA. Whether it was Jesse Govan or Dante Hall or Cody Demps, And so, or, I wouldn't even be surprised if like Jared Jack would want one more shot in the NBA,
I wouldn't be surprised if someone took a shot on Jared Jack.
Yeah,
I mean, he played
right,
outstanding.
Right. Exactly. And so for me, Brian Shaw had a hard job because it's like the Ignite team is built for these young guys. But at the same time, he has all these vets on the team who have made, $100+ million in the NBA, right? That have needs that they need to be met as well. They want to play as well. They're not there just to ride the bench and mentor, And so it's always hard when, you have for me, there was kind of like conflicting interests. I wonder how I think he did a good job handling it. I think the overall Ignite season was pretty good. I mean, they lost in the first round of the playoffs, but there was a lot of people that thought, oh no, these young guys are not going to be able to compete. They're not going to be ready to go against, a lot of these G Leaguers, even though it's the G League nowadays is as talented as it's ever been, And so a lot of people were like, I don't think it's going to work, And I bet you a lot of people within the G League itself were like, oh, what if this team goes, 2-13, right? What if this team like wins 5 games? Then everyone's gonna be like, oh, it was a total failure, whatever, And so I think having they went 8-7 this year, having a winning record and making the playoffs, it just bodes well for the future. And I think in a couple years, as long as they continue to get more of the top tier talents that are in high school basketball, they'll not only grow as a team and hopefully maybe one day compete for a championship, but they'll grow the league exponentially too.
I want to circle back really quick to Jonathan Kuminga because I think we didn't get a big dive on him. And Kuminga, he was originally considered Cade Cunningham's biggest competitor for number 1 overall. He still might go number 2. I think he would have locked it up if he could have shot from 3 a little better. That's pretty much what everyone's been saying. He could go anywhere from 2 to 5 just because this is the most top, like, deep and top heavy draft of all. This could go down as one of the best drafts of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He's listed as 6'6", but if he's 6'6", then Jalen Green has to be like 6'1". Kuminga's a tank. 210 pounds, looks more than that also. Massive wingspan.
Yeah.
I've seen him compared to no one has really been able to nail down a comparison. I have seen Pascal Siakam, Sean Marion, Jaylen Brown, Kawhi Leonard, all these. I think we should just talk about him a bit. I mean, he projects to be a crazy multi-tool defender, but no one knows the G League better than you. How about you sell him a bit,
Yeah, Kuminga, I mean, he has every player that you just mentioned, he has a bit of them in his game, And he's a guy that's just a dog. Like, not saying that Jalen Green isn't. Jalen Green is also a dog. But I look at Kuminga. Kuminga always had like a scowl on his face, He just always looked mad. And that was on the court, and that was in, post-game conferences too. I would always, listen into their post-game press conferences. And Kuminga never had a smile on his face, even after a win. And I was like, man, either, it could have been just the fact that he may be a little bit reserved or whatever, it doesn't show much emotion, or it could just be that he is like, especially after a loss. I mean, he was just looking like, the way that Kobe would look after a loss. I could see that same fire in his eyes. But yeah, he is so multi-dimensional. He can play anywhere from like the 2 and then in maybe some situation you can put him at the 4, right? 2 through 4. And, extremely athletic, unbelievable at the defensive end, and he's going to be a guy that is going to be, in my opinion, an all NBA player in maybe 5 years or so, an all defensive player in 5 years, And the way that we look at Kawhi, like, oh yeah, he can get it done on both ends. He can guard the best player. I think we'll look at Kuminga the same way, and like I said before, he's just so young that it's amazing to see, like, these guys at this age of 19, they're already so good and so developed. I can't imagine you give Jonathan Kuminga, 4 more years training against NBA players, how good that he's going to be. Same with Jalen Green. You just give them the opportunity to maybe develop into their bodies a little more, understand the game a little more, and these guys are going to be absolute studs.
One thing that I think has been weird with I've been following pre-draft coverage. I am a pre-draft nerd. That is
okay.
That is where I was pre-draft, trade deadline, free agency. Those are where I became the nerd. Those are what inspired this whole podcast. I don't think any prospect has been picked apart harder than Jonathan Kuminga and Jalen Green. I don't think any prospect's getting a more unfair shake than those two, especially at the top of the draft. But Kuminga stepped in and was running the offense. I mean, that first game was where I looked at it and I texted Chaz. I said, Cade Cunningham might not go first overall. The way that, then Cade Cunningham dropped 40, and I was like, okay, we're gonna have to back that statement up.
Right.
But the way that Kuminga can run an offense at his size, the way that Kuminga is, he's basically a point forward and a point guard and any position you want on defense. He's just this ultimate type of prospect. And Jalen Green, I mean, people are like, oh, will he be able to score in the league? Dude, G-Leaguers are amazing defenders. Some of the best defenders in the G League, I would say, rival NBA defenders. So I don't know where these questions are coming from. I see these two as like way too picked apart. I don't know if you've been getting the same vibes. I mean, you know better than anyone.
Yeah, that is true. I think it's because they decided to take this unconventional path. A lot of it is because they were really the first two. And then also Daisha Nix and Isaiah Todd, but those were the first two like headliners that took this path to where we're going to skip college and join the Ignite team. So I wonder if it's like people just picking them apart because they're thinking like, whenever someone does something that's non-traditional, people tend to criticize them more. Whether it was like when Brandon Jennings went over, was it Italy they went over to, or Rome or something like that?
Greece,
yeah, something like that. But when Brandon Jennings went over, there was a ton of criticism because he was over there playing against grown men and he didn't really play all that well. And so everyone's like, oh, is he even that good of a player? But then he still ended up getting picked in the lottery by the Bucks and had that crazy rookie season. And then like when LaMelo went overseas and he wasn't playing all that well and everyone was like, oh, that league is a bunch of bums, and then everyone, so when you take routes like that, they're just going to pick it apart and criticize you unnecessarily, but the thing is that these guys are really trendsetters. I think they don't really realize how monumental them joining the Ignite team could be for other high school players, Yeah. And as kind of like a development system for these guys to be like, you know what, I don't agree with the college mold, and if I want to, they could get paid up to $500,000 this year, and not all the young prospects were getting $500K, but Kuminga and Jalen did, and so if I'm a top high school prospect, I'm like, I can stay a year in college and become a really really popular guy, or and be the man on campus, or I can go to the Ignite team and just make $500,000, and playing against different competition. You know what I'm saying?
That actually leads to a big thing I wanted to mention. You said like become a really popular guy, and
yeah.
One more time, this is why the NBA needs you. This is why the NBA needs you. The biggest issue for the Ignite team, without a doubt, the biggest issue, nowhere near enough publicity. You have 19-year-olds torching grown men.
Yeah.
That should be everywhere. The NBA account should be posting about it. The official G League account should be posting about it.
Yes, I agree. I agree 1,000%.
It's the biggest issue, without a doubt. And you are mitigating that. They need to get you in on that for real. They need to really give you all the source material, all the camera angles, all the everything.
That's been the biggest thing is so every G League team has an Instagram page. Whatever whatever reason, the Ignite team didn't, care about the other
Yeah.
17. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
You cut out
Okay.
for a second.
And there are a ton of people out there that didn't care about the other 17 teams in the bubble this year. They only cared about one team, So
Yeah.
I would have loved to see the G League have an account specifically for Ignite content, and of course show the veterans. But hey, people are going to eat up Jalen Green everywhere. People are going to eat up Jonathan Kuminga. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, the G League itself, I was surprised they didn't have a separate page with just Ignite content, because I'm telling you, there's 20,000 people right now that would follow that in a heartbeat.
I follow a page right now with 320 followers that posts once a week all the box scores of the games. That's it. That's all they post. Just because I wanted to always have the Ignite guys showing up in my feed. I was like, I want to know what points they got, and like,
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
it.
And another thing about the G League in terms of its own growth is I would love for the NBA to push it more. And I think that, especially over the last few years, we've seen the NBA really take initiative in promoting the WNBA, whether it's giving every one of those players the orange hoodie with the WNBA logo on it, or having commercials about it, or having players sit courtside at games, or just having players like mention them in interviews, And, with the WNBA, there's been, especially among the male population, I would say, the results are mixed, right? There's a ton of people that are like, even if Chris Paul and LeBron and Devin Booker, even if they're promoting it, there's a ton of NBA fans that are going to say, oh, it's trash, right? Oh, they're not talented. That was a waste of time, right? But at the same time, even though the results have been mixed, the biggest thing is that it's being talked about.
Yeah.
And we don't see that enough from the NBA players in terms of the G League. In fact, I don't see it at all. I was digging through these like different video archives, and I found this one video from 2008 of Kobe saying, the G League showcase is going to be on ESPN or whatever, tune in, but it was it was something scripted that he just said, right? Yeah. But, I've never heard Kobe or LeBron or whoever talk about the G League in terms of just being like, yeah, there's some really, really, really good talent in the G League that more people need to pay attention to, And so I would love to see the league promote it more, and I would love to see the players promote it more. I think that's huge for its growth, because like I said before, if LeBron wears the G League hoodie or just mentions it in a couple of interviews, I'm telling you, LeBron has such a big platform that even if these people don't turn into lifelong fans, they'll start at the very least paying attention a little bit more. Oh, because LeBron mentioned it, Oh, because James Harden mentioned it, or KD mentioned it, And so I would love to see that on their end. And I would love to see them at more games. I know sometimes that the G League arenas aren't really, in all that close proximity to the NBA arenas, But I would love to see more players at games, sitting courtside, and just overall promoting it. And I think that would do wonders for the popularity of the league.
That you touched on something I wanted to talk about a little later. Some of these G League teams, the G League has a struggle that they have to deal with between picking affiliates that are really close to their team, like the LA Lakers have the South Bay Lakers. It's like a 30-minute drive or something. Like you could do 2 practices in the same day.
Right.
But then you look at a team like the Boston Celtics, whose affiliate is the Portland, Maine Red Claws.
Yes.
And that's a 6-hour drive. That is that is not a one-day thing.
Right.
You don't get to go to Maine for the day and then come to the Celtics for the night. I was wondering if you have any thoughts on that, if you have thoughts on is it better to explore new markets with the G League, or is it more important that the G League teams are right next to their NBA affiliates so that they can be called up back and forth faster?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would say this. I think there's positive to both ends, right? And the Maine Red Claws, they play in Portland, right? And most people don't even know where that is, And so, and you're right. If you're, like I said before, if you're a Celtics player, you can't. You like you said, 6 hours. You can't go to a Red Claws game and then be back for the Celtics game, or it would just be so much of a hassle. It's really like a whole day trip to go back and forth. If you're driving, and maybe it's different if you're taking a plane, but part of me likes the fact that they're in these small cities, in these small towns, because the Maine Red Claws every year have some of the best attendance rates in the G League, and that's because there's no other pro basketball around the area. Last year, for the first time, I went to Erie, and Erie was, for me, a 7-hour drive. And so I went to Erie to go watch them play, the Erie Bayhawks play. And I just did it out of fun because I wanted to see the arena and stuff like that. But Erie, Pennsylvania, no disrespect, has nothing there. Nothing there. It's like total, it's just, well, first off, it was freezing there, right?
Yeah.
And when I was in Maryland, it wasn't even really all that cold. I went to Erie, and it was absolutely freezing, and it was snowing. And I was like, oh my God. And it took me so much longer to get there because I had to drive in the snow, and it wasn't snowing in Maryland. And so, but I got there, and there's nothing in Erie, but the game was packed. And I was like, oh my God. And so I really do think that these fans from these smaller areas, they kind of rally around these teams. Because the local NBA team is 2 or 3 hours away, and I had a friend that used to work for the Westchester Knicks, and he was telling me that the Westchester Knicks games have good attendance rates because, Westchester from Madison Square Garden is, maybe a couple hours or so. And so it's not so easy just to be like, oh, I'm going to go see a Knicks game. Right. And so those are their Knicks, essentially, the Red Claws, those are their Celtics, and then every once in a while they'll see a Celtic if they get sent to the G League, or if they're on a two-way or something like that. Right. So part of me does like it in these small areas, to tell you the truth. There's 2 G League teams near me. There's the Delaware 87ers, which are now the Delaware Bluecoats. And same thing with them. When I first started going there, the reason why I love the atmosphere so much was because it was in this small area in Delaware, and a lot of the local area would just come and they take their young kids, and it was a very, very family friendly environment. The cool thing is that you could stand outside of a G League locker room and no one would tell you to move. And so a lot of the pictures I have with the players are like just outside the locker room. Like a couple of years ago when Jerry Stackhouse was coaching the Raptors 905, I stood outside the locker room and I took a picture with Jerry Stackhouse, and I waited for him to come out.
Awesome.
And then a couple of years ago when the Maine Red Claws came to town, I waited for Anthony Bennett. And Anthony Bennett came outside the locker room. I was like, "Can I get a picture?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And you know what I mean? So I think that the G League, they thrive off of, being in these small markets and having these family-friendly environments where people can just enjoy a game, that's been the G League mold for the past, ever since I've been following, at the very least. And I would kind of like it to continue. I wouldn't really want them to move to the big cities where they're kind of overshadowed by the NBA team and other sources of entertainment.
Yeah.
You brought up the Erie Bayhawks. They're a really interesting G League team because they've had like 7 different NBA affiliates in the last 13 years of their existence.
Yeah.
And even now they're affiliated with the Pelicans, but they're building a new arena that's going to be the biggest arena in the G League at 17,654 seats in Birmingham. Do you know anything that's going on with the Erie Bayhawks? Because the only teams without a G League team left are Phoenix and Denver right now, or Phoenix and the Trailblazers. So are they going to be just an unaffiliated team, and they're staying around, or?
Yeah. I don't know for sure, but my guess is that they're going to be unaffiliated. And there's, that would be the first time we've seen it. There's actually an unaffiliated team that's coming for next season too, in New Mexico City.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Mexico City. And so, so they would be the second. But yeah, the G League structure is a little bit weird right now because there are 3 teams that don't have. The Suns said they don't want their G League team. So the Suns had the Northern Arizona Suns, and James Jones said, we don't really use it that much. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but he was like, we don't really use it that much, and we don't really see it being a big part of our development system and how we, grow players and stuff like that. And so I think Robert Sarver was like, you know what, I'm paying all this money to have this G League team, and it's I'm not really utilizing it, so why have it, right? And so we've kind of seen the last of the Northern Arizona Suns, and then there's the Blazers and Nuggets, which don't have a team. I could kind of see
Mhm.
maybe one of those teams buying it out, but then it'd be so far away, you know?
Yeah, because they're
And
both.
so, yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't really know what the situation is in terms of that. It's like, why would I buy a team that's like all the way half across the country of where I am, you know?
It's probably
Mhm.
cheaper to just
And
make a new
so,
team. Like,
yeah, yeah. So I don't really know what's the Bayhawks is kind of weird because yeah, you're right. They've been affiliated with a bunch of different teams, and you know they're always like it's like 1 year they're here, 1 year they're there, and they always switch management too.
Mhm.
With that being said, they had a really good season this year, but yeah, I don't really know. That's a good question. I haven't heard anything concrete about what's going to happen with them.
That's fair. It's an interesting team. I was looking at all the different affiliates and just couldn't understand how they had been so many different teams affiliated with the Erie
Yeah,
Bayhawks
yeah.
in so many seasons.
Right, right. But the Bayhawks are a couple years ago, Malik. You guys remember Malik Rose?
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, Malik Rose was the GM of their team, and he won Executive of the Year. And I know Malik. I've known Malik for a couple of years, and they've had a lot of cool players that came in and out of Erie. Like one of my favorites was, you remember Terrence Jones? Who was on Kentucky a couple
Yeah.
a
He
while
had
back
a
with
couple
the
of good years
Rockets.
for
Yeah,
the Rockets, right?
yeah. He was on Erie, and when he was on the Bayhawks, I would watch him all the time, and he was like 20 and 12 a night, you know.
Yeah.
And then they had you guys remember Cliff Alexander?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cliff Alexander played for Kansas, and he was one of the top high school prospects at one point. He was at Erie. So yeah, they've had a lot of cool players come through. But yeah, the situation with like, who owns their rights and stuff like that, it's as far as I know, it's kind of up in the air at this point.
That's fair. You'd mentioned also before about getting NBA players more involved and going to G League games and trying to promote the league. One of the things that I noticed when researching the G League was that the South Bay Lakers play at the UCLA Health Training Center.
Right.
That has a maximum capacity of 750 people at the gym. What kind of venue is that for a professional team? And like, if LeBron showed up there, you could fill that gym within 10 seconds. Like you could charge a cover fee if LeBron was there, double the ticket price originally. Like,
right. Yeah, the South Bay Arena. It's first off, it's really nice though.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch like the South Bay Lakers game, it's in terms of like just the actual brightness of the arena and then like the colorways and it's one of my favorite arenas to watch games at. And then just we were talking about the Erie Bayhawks arena is my least favorite because it's super dark, right? And but yeah, it's really small. And from what I've seen watching the games over the years, is that even though they don't seat that many people, I always see empty seats in the arena.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they're thinking like when it's time to move and if we get a bigger following, maybe we can look at other options. But I think for the time being, they're like, you know what? If we get 750 fans, it's probably a really good night, And up until then, but I was thinking like if they were to have gotten like a LiAngelo Ball or something like that, I can guarantee you that more than 750 people would want to come to that game.
Yeah. In UCLA, like
yeah, right. So I wonder where they would move it to if that was the case. I mean, like just
maybe they could just use the actual UCLA basketball court.
right. And it's every once in a while the NBA, the G League teams would have a game or two in the actual arenas. But I would say this, it didn't look good because it's cool for the players to play on the NBA arena.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a fan watching, you're looking at the gigantic arena, and remember if the South Bay gym can only fit 750 people, if there's 300 people there, it sort of looks a little packed, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's half full, But if you get 300 people in an arena that fits 20,000, it almost looks like there's 5 people there,
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what? Maybe that's smart. Maybe that's smart to keep the arena small, because you don't want to look at the, to have it on TV, and then someone says, "Wow, there's 5 people there," even though there's 300 in the arena that suits 20,000. 300 people looks like really it's just a handful of guys, right? And so for production purposes, in terms of like TV, and then also for cost purposes, like you don't want to have to pay to rent out the big arenas if only a small amount of people are going.
All right, I think this leads into my last big question.
Sure.
Again, about the Ignite, just because everyone loves talking about the Ignite. Do you think that this experiment was a success? Do you think the G League Ignite experiment was a success?
Yeah, I do. I think it was a big success because they started off the season was 4-0, and then and everyone was like, "Oh my God, 4-0! Like this team is rolling right now." And just like any other team, basketball is a game of ups and downs. Like we saw with the Bluecoats this year, where they started 7-0, and then they lost 4 straight, and then they were at one point like the 6th seed after being the #1 seed, and then they got together at the end of the season, made the championship game. So basketball is just is just a game of ups and downs, and you have to filter through all that stuff. But to me, it was just a success because, like I said before, there were just so much uncertainty of how they were going to do, and I think if I was someone in the G League who was on board and getting this Ignite team together, my whole thing was like, are they going to bomb? And they did the exact opposite. They went 8-7. They made the playoffs. If Kaminga had gone down, they would have been better than 8-7, because he missed like the last 6 games, 5-6 games or so.
Yeah, something
So
like that.
if he hadn't gone down, you're thinking of maybe they win 10 games, right? And so 10 games in a 15-game season, it's like, 66%. That's pretty successful. And so from that perspective, from a winning perspective, it was a success. I think in terms of like the growth perspective and how they were able to attract more people to the G League, major success. And as I previously said, they should have done a better job of putting the Ignite team out there. And I know that they did a lot of promotion on the actual G League page, but I would have loved to see their own Instagram page, right, where it's all Ignite guys. Because like I said, tons of people don't care about the Lakeland Magic. Tons of people don't care about the Agua Caliente Clippers, and so they just want to see Jalen Green. Unfortunately, they only want to see Jalen Green and Jonathan Kuminga. And so they should have done a better job in terms of exposing them that way. But it's only year one, and I assume that they're gonna learn from maybe things they didn't do, and then build that into their second year and years moving forward. But yeah, I think it's if I'm a high school prospect also looking at this, I'm looking at it as like the veterans were great. Having Jared Jack, having Amir Johnson, having even like other G League vets like Cody Demps and Reggie Hearn. Those are 2 like really respected guys in the G League. And then there's like Bobby Brown as well. Having those guys, and everything that I've heard was that from the players' perspective, whether it was Green or Kuminga or Todd, is that those guys were actually a big help, and they were like their older brothers in a way. And so if I'm a prospect, I'm really thinking to myself, this is legitimate. I think that the whole thing was that they wanted to prove that they were legitimate in their first year, and I think they did that to the highest extent. They had a winning record. I thought the coaching was really good. They displayed the young talents who were on display were able to shine in a lot of senses, and if I'm a prospect, like I said, I'm thinking this could actually be a route for me. I'd rather make $500,000 and be the coolest kid on the UCLA campus. I'd rather make $500,000 and play on national TV almost every game than be the coolest kid at the University of Florida. You know what I mean? And so,
and you're definitely not getting paid that money if you go to college. No way, shape, or form. You don't get any money if you go to college. Not at all.
Right. And
$0.
Right. and there's always those talks about people getting money under the table. But if you get the money under the table, you got to worry every single moment that that the FBI is going to show up at your door and be like, and for me, that would be horrible. Like I couldn't sleep at night knowing that the IRS, or not the IRS, but the FBI might know that I took $100,000 under the table from a booster. So I'd rather just make $500,000 if I'm one of the top prospects, make it legally, be 19 years old and have $500,000, and at the same time, they're afforded options. Like they can go to college, they can take college classes if they want. I don't even know if they'd want to, but it's an option. So it does show that the G League does care about them from a well-rounded perspective. And then as an athlete, I think you want to know that the people that you're working for care about you as more than just an athlete and what you're going to produce for them on the court.
Yeah. And I think one of my true judgments of the G League Ignite is going to be watching these guys next year in the NBA and seeing, because I think one of the best things of this is watching all these young guys get the mistakes out of their game and adjust to more NBA size and speed before they even get to the league. Like one of my favorite parts basically of all 4 of these guys is just being able to watch them learn how to go through their progressions in the game and read the game and understand basketball at a high level much better than I think you do in college, just because college there's almost more of an emphasis on winning that season and not necessarily development of you and your career path. Whereas the G League Ignite, like, of course they want to win, but these kids know and the coaches know that they're here to go to the next level. So for them to learn and be able to have the ball in their hands playing against professional guys, like, I think we're really going to see them be good earlier in their NBA careers, and it's going to show and help blow up the NBA G League Ignite program, because these guys, all of them, I think, are going to be really good NBA players very quickly. Like, they all have the tools to be able to do it and have less adjustments to make than everyone else coming out of college. Like,
I think so too. And one point that I didn't talk about too much is, like, being in college, and I worked for the UMBC team, and of course the UMBC team is not like playing at Kentucky or anything like that, but there are still outside distractions, whether when you go to campus, and, if it's a normal year, you have the parties and you have the girls and stuff like that. Having these guys in the bubble, and now not every year is going to be in the bubble, but having Kuminga and Green and Todd and Nix in the bubble, where it was just basketball 24/7, and then if they weren't doing anything basketball related, they were just simply in their rooms. I kind of think that was a good thing for them. They could just take this year and focus solely on the game that's going to make them millions of dollars in a few years, or by next year.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, you have these guys that are certainly going to be in the NBA, but you're just preparing them much more and giving them saying, okay, I know you don't, you're not going to be able to party. You're not going to be able to, be the star on campus, but you sacrifice that and you spend this entire year just so focused solely on your game, right? By the time the draft comes around, you're going to be maybe twice as ready as you would if you had gone to college. And so part of me thinks that was a good thing for them, to tell you the truth, because when you're young and you're impressionable, it doesn't matter if you're the most humble kid in the world. If when you're the star of Kentucky or the star of Duke, there's just going to be pressures that you're going to give into, and for as far as I can tell, I don't think that they had those same pressures, and they could just solely focus on the game that's going to make them rich.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really excited to see how this goes in the draft. I think that's going to be the official make or break for these guys, is if all four of them get drafted. I think if all four get drafted, they need to make a second Ignite team. They need to get a second Ignite team, have two teams going, let the top, split the top guys so that they can play against each other. I think that this has been I think if they get all four guys drafted, they really need to look at expanding this program to such a bigger level.
I would love to see that. I think in the future we could see multiple Ignite teams, because where you have probably the same structure where it's not only just young guys, but it's a mixture of the young guys and the veterans. But one thing I was thinking about too is, you take a guy like Principal Singh, who was he's the Indian center on the Ignite team, and he didn't play very much this year, or he barely played at all. He only had 3 buckets all year. But he's a guy that's looking to become the second NBA player from India, or the second Indian player Indian descent in the NBA. The first was Simbular, who played for the Sacramento Kings a few years ago. He was the 7'5" guy. And then the other one was – then there's another guy named Satnam Singh.
Oh, we know about Satnam Singh. IMG Academy alum.
Yes.
Satnam Singh.
Yeah. But the thing about Satnam is that he never actually played in the league. That's why I only said there's one other NBA player. He was drafted by the Mavericks, but he never actually played for the Mavericks, and he was in the G League for the Texas Legends. But so Principal, his whole goal this year was to become the second NBA player to appear in the NBA game, And he didn't really play that much this year. So I'm really curious to see what happens to a guy like him. Like, is he eligible to return to the Ignite team for a second year? Because no one's forcing him to go to the NBA draft. Right? He's 20 years old. He could say, like, I didn't really get an opportunity to shine this year. If I had to guess, he was the forgotten man. We talked about the big four, but he was the forgotten man on that Ignite team that had also had NBA aspirations, And so what happens to a guy like him, or moving forward in the future, what happens to other guys who maybe were highly recruited out of high school? They're the 5-star recruits, they're the McDonald's All-Americans, but they go to the Ignite team and they don't show out the way that they would have hoped, and maybe any draft stock that they could have had leading into the Ignite season, maybe they lose that, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden they're not on any draft boards and they're thinking to themselves, I enter the draft this year, I'm not going to be selected. What happens to guys like that? So, there's a lot of questions, I think, too. thankfully for the Ignite team this year, all 4 played well. All 4 of those big players played well.
Yeah.
But what's going to happen to Singh?
What's going to happen to Kai Soto also? What's going to happen to Kai
Soto? And I was disappointed not to see Kai Soto because, long story short, I actually was an assistant coach 1 year at a prep school, and we had a player who was 7'3". His name is Jordan Wilmore, and Jordan and Kai Soto at the Skills Factory last year were like the 2-headed monsters down low, because Kai Soto 7'3", and then Jordan Wilmore 7'3" as well. And I was the assistant when Jordan was a sophomore, so he wasn't as developed as he is now. But I watched a ton of their games, and I was like, Kai, he's such an intriguing prospect because he has, a lot of ways he was like Pau Gasol, where he has a great footwork and he can play with his back to the basket. He's good at face up, but he's really skinny, and he's doesn't look very strong, and it doesn't look like he's been in the weight room at all. And so is he gonna, even with his height, is he gonna get bullied around by maybe these shorter but stockier G League big men who are significantly more physical, but maybe not as skilled, And I wish we could have seen that, but he went to go play for the Filipino national team. But yeah, I think there's still a lot of questions about what's going to happen to guys who don't perform. But if you do perform, you got nothing to worry about. But yeah, I'm worried about what's going to happen to them. The guy that was the big star recruit and then didn't really pan out. What is next for him?
Yeah, and I mean that's a question that they'll have to answer with Principal Singh. But I think that they I imagine that they had a plan. I hope they had a plan. But whatever it is, I mean, we'll see that in the coming months. We'll see that in the next season,
in the future years.
All in all, Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure having you, man. This has been great. This has been
appreciate
awesome.
you guys so much.
Please tell the world where they can find your work. Plug everything you want to plug. Please go ahead.
Yeah, you can follow my account G-LeagueTV. So just G-LeagueTV, no hyphens or anything like that. And, give us a follow, drop some likes. And then my personal page is Jeffrey, Jeffrey, Sosa, Sosa 300. And so you can follow me on both, and I'll follow you back.
Awesome. We will be posting a link to both of his pages when we post this interview, and probably every video we post from it. So if you don't want to remember those, there will be tags. Do not worry, you will be able to find him and all of his amazing work. Jeff, thanks again for coming out, my man.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it, fellas.
To all the listeners, please keep liking, rating, reviewing, subscribing, all that, downloading. And for now, this has been Ball Talk.
It's Ball Talk. It's Ball Talk, baby. 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 Baby, 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 baby.